All right, so welcome everyone back to the Minchat Chinuch Shir, and tonight we're going to be doing the Minchat Chinuch has a long sub-sefer within his chibur he called it Meisach HaShabbos, and basically what he does is the tie into this week's parsha is pretty obvious. Naser Sadibris, the Zachar Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshay. And the pasuk of Leisasa Kol Malacha is Mitzvah Lamed Beis. Zachas Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshay is the Mitzvah of Kiddush. It's the Mitzvah Asay of Shabbos. Zachreo Al Yayin. We're doing the Lavin of Shabbos, the Issa Malacha, the prohibition against work on Shabbos. And the pasuk he quotes is Leisasa Kol Malacha. But then the Minchat Chinuch decided, since the prohibition is Kol Malacha, I've got to explain All Lametes Malachas. Now, the Chsachet the Avnei Nezer, wrote a chibur on the Lametes Malachas, or at least he began to write it. It was Beethoven's Unfinished Symphony. I don't know if he made it through all Lametes. I don't remember off the top of my head right now. But he had a word play for the name of the sefer called Iglei Tal. Tal is Lametes backwards. So, just another tie-in, you may ask, if I've got 39 Avos Malachas to choose from, why am I doing Kotzer? We have a little klichem this year here in the shul on Shabbos before lining, and a segue from last week's parsha to this week's parsha, very interesting, the Svarnei. In last week's parsha, it talks about when the mon fell, so it says, V'yetzei ha'am lilkait, and the Svarnei says, Zeh chilul Shabbos vade. There's a, for sure, chilul Shabbos. Why? Mishum oikadav megidulei. When they picked up the mon off of the sand, off of the ground, that's oikadav megidulei. Okay? So that's why I decided, so to speak, I was holding the sugya of Kotzer and Tailish on that particular malach anyway. So I decided to take the Minchat Chinuch from that particular malach. Okay, so it's in the new print. It's in the Machon Yerushalayim print of the Minchat Chinuch. We're beginning on Daf Kuf Nun Aleph, the lower left hand column. HaKotzer, Gimel HaKotzer. Okay. I want to do something a little bit out of order here before I even start reading and teaching the Minchat Chinuch. By the way, I got a little tzafloigan over here. Derech Eretz Kadmol L'Torah. I want to thank the very worthy organization TorahAnytime.com for recording these shiur and for making them available to wider public. For those who couldn't make the shiur tonight, if you'd like to make the shiur, we're here at 1575 Coney Island Avenue in the heart of Flatbush, Brooklyn. Every Thursday night at 8 o'clock we have Minchat Chinuch. And at 9:15, Chasidus for Misnagdim. We're going to dedicate the schus of the Limud HaTorah of tonight's shir for the Refuah Shleima of Moreno of Yosef Shalom Al Yashiv. Anyone remember his name by hand off hard? Yosef ben Sar Moshe. Refuah Shleima. Okay. So, I want to read you a shlik l'Gemara, and here's really the issue. Everything we're going to be talking about tonight is really surrounding and talking about and addressing this one issue, and to wit, Kotzer. Yeah, we know there's a seder of malachas on Shabbos. The first 9 malachas of the malachas on Shabbos are called Sidur de Pas. The sequence of malachas that are required for bread production. So it goes Zareya, Chayrish, according to some Rishonim, Chayrish comes before Zareya, Kotzer. All right, you sow, and then you cut, you harvest. All right. So the big issue over here is it limited to Gedulei Karka, or is it not limited to Gedulei Karka? Is it a botanic malacha, or is it possible to have Kotzer on other things that grow perhaps, but we wouldn't call them botanic. We couldn't call, or at least botanic is maybe stretching, let's be very literal in the Lashon Chazal. Okay? Gedulei Karka means things that go out of the ground. Okay? Contemporary shals, we're not learning halacha l'maisa over here, but I don't know if hydroponics that grow in a hothouse, if that's it, strictly speaking, Gedulei Karka either. It could be the same lettuce, same head of lettuce, but if it grew in the ground, it maybe has one getter, and if it grows in a hothouse, perhaps it has another getter, or hothouse, whatever, with hydroponics, without touching the ground. Other things that are in Nagaya, we're going to see in a moment. Very, very, when you first read it, this Gemara is, for want of a better word, No, why should I say an untoward word? It's a chiddush, a big chiddush. If you look at what they did in the Mishkan, that they were dealing with either, the question of all those early malachas. Are we talking about the wheat that they had to grow for menachas and for lachem apanim? Or we're talking about the samamonim, the various roots and herbs that they had to grow for the dyes that they needed and spices they needed for the ketairos, those kind of things. Okay, so listen, this is a Gemara that starts on Daf Kuf Zayin on the base and Shabbos and it continues on Kuf Ches. Okay. Omer Shmuel, Hashem ledag min hayam, kivin sheyesh boi kasela chayiv. Somebody who fishes a fish out of the sea. Okay? Once it dries up to the point, a sella size, an area on the fish, on the scales of the fish, the size of a sella, starts to go dry, it's a goner. That's we would call that coating for a human being. The fish is not gonna make it anymore. Yeah. Pass it down to yeah. So the Rishonim say this doesn't necessarily mean ayam. This could be like, some of us remember our bubbas, maybe there's still some stores that do it, I don't know. You went down to the fishmonger, you had live carp, swimming around in the tub, you picked the one that you wanted. Okay, a lot of Rishonim, are mafarish that the Indian here is not what we call tzad. It's another trapping animals. There's another one of Ravas Malachas on Shabbos. It's mutzad vaimid. This fish is caught already, it's trapped, it's got nowhere to go. But just lifting it up out of the water is chayiv. The Gemara is non-committal, doesn't say chayiv mishum what, which particular malach it is. Weiter. Omar Mar Bar Hamduri, Amar Shmuel. Haishit yodei lemei behema v'dildel ubish v'meaya chayiv. If somebody in animal husbandry, a shepherd lamazogin, sticks his hand into the birth canal of a behemoth and is medaldal an ubish v'meaya, okay, as clear as I can see from the Rishonim, this does not mean he gave birth to the calf. He calved the animal. It means he aborted. He aborted the fetus. Okay, he got the fetus out of the animal. Chayiv, my timer. Amar Rava B'Amduri. Amar Rava said B'Amduri. Asberli explained to me. Lava Amar Rav Sheshes. Didn't Rav Sheshes say? Haiman the Torah Shusa Mehizmi V'Higi. If a person detaches hops from briars and brambles, it seems that some ivy grows on trees, some hops grow in some kind of bushes. That's two different plants, two different organisms, right? But if you detach the hops from the things that they adhere to, okay, they don't give it a succinct one-word name of an av or a tolda, Kotzer, Teilish, so here the zushtel that the Gemara is making. The Gemara is saying that pulling an animal out of an embryo out of the mother's womb, that's the same gather, the same malacha as taking hops, which are clearly botanic life, off of the host plant. Okay, that's the zushtel. So just based on that Gemara, what would you say? If I commit dav megedulei is a longhand term for what we call the malacha of Kotzer or Teilish, is Teilish limited to gedulei karka? Okay or not? Okay. What's with the fish? Not so clear. Maybe the fish is Aikadav Megedule. It grows in the water. Doesn't grow from the water, but it grows in the water. Maybe that's also an Indian of Aikadav Megedule. Okay. Huh?
It's not about killing the animal.
But pashtus, right? But it's here in the middle of the sugya. Be patient. We're going to see what the Minchas Chinuch does with all this. Amar Abaye, Haiman the Tolish Pitra, Me'una the Chatzva Mechayev. Somebody who detaches fungus, mushrooms that grow on the pail, the deli, that you lower into the well, you also mechayev mishamayka davar megedulei. All right. Okay, I think that's enough of the shtickle going. So we see all kinds of permutations. Okay, it's important to note that other places in Shas it says mushrooms don't grow from the ground; they grow from the air. Exactly what that means is, I don't have the science background to know exactly what Chazal mean, but they're obviously trying to say something that's different than your traditional plant. Okay, in Hilchos Brachos is also Chatzah Chamat Nafkamina on mushrooms and make a shackle. You don't make a bar piyadam. Okay. All right. Jetzt lassen wir anheben lernen the Minchas Chinuch. HaKotzer. Lashon Rambam Kan Perek Zayin Halacha Daled. HaKotzer Tvua Oikitnius. Rabbi tomorrow. Okay. In Lashon, I don't know if it's Lashon Kodesh or Lashon Chazal. Okay, there's one of these things where the precise same activity, depending on the fruit or the vegetable that you're talking about, pulling it off of its makom gedula has a different verb, has a different name. Okay, one is baitzer anavim and gaider tomorrow. One is not gaider anavim and baitzer tomorrow. It means exactly the same thing. It means pulling it off the tree or off the vine in the case of the anavim. That's all one av malacha. Shekol achas mehen laka davar megidulei. Okay, all of that is to uproot a thing from the way it grew. V'loshen aram perches halacha gimel hakotzer kegregeris chayv. What's the shear? It has to be kotzer kegregeris. I think it's a large dried fig kegregeris. V'amber avamagad the kotzer stam alachila v'tzor kegregeris. The kol shir achila kegregeris k'mavur kamapamim. I don't know why kol shir achila is not Kazayas, or Bazay State Magad Mishnah, Kol Shir Achilas Kegregeris. Vim Kotzer L'Dvar Macherim Yesh Shir Macherim. Okay, this goes back to the general overarching rule of Hilchos Shabbos, which is Malachas Machshavas Asvatayra. For a Malachah to be a Chiyav Derais, to be a Tayradical level of Hilchos Shabbos, it's got to be purposeful and meaningful. It has to be goal-oriented. There's an objective here in mind. It doesn't have to be the whole step. It could be, the goal could be one little step in a chain, in a sequence of malachas, right? But what's the ultimate goal here? So if you are being kotzer or tailish edibles, so then this shear is the shear of achila. If you're being malaket, if you're cutting firewood, if you're cutting limbs of a tree that you want to use for kindling, then there's a different shear. What's the minimum shear of heating from firewood? That's how it goes. Building materials, and it could have another shear. Feeding the animals could have another shear. Everything has a shear depending on what the ultimate purpose is. Okay. So here he calls it Av Malach. In other words, it's a question of semantics. Hagam, that katsira, if we're talking about wheat or other grains, is done with a sickle, is done with a kli, and tailish of various plants. Okay, I don't think people take clippers to get figs off the tree. Certainly, there are certainly some vegetables that you pick by hand before farming was mechanized. Right? So the fact that one is done with a kli and one is done by hand doesn't seem to be a nafkamina. He calls it all the same av malachim. Later it's going to be mashman out like that. Ois beis. Because of around kamper ches halacha gimel, the tailish told of the kotzer. Okay, all these other verbs, baitzer anavim, goider tamarim, that's all the same av malachim. What do I care if what you're harvesting is wheat or what you're harvesting is grapes? But tailish, that's already a told of kotzer. Okay? Told is, generally speaking, this is a big machlokes Rishayim, but let's go for simplicity's sake. A good working definition of a told of an av malach is when you've got the same tachlis, the same objective that this step that was done in the Mishkan, aka the av malacha was, but a different activity, a different pool. Right? Like we said, I don't know if we said in the Minchas Chinuch, but we said certainly in Shul a couple weeks ago on Shabbos, for example, told us of Zayreya, of putting a seed in the ground, fertilizer, watering plants, exposing them to more sunlight could be a told. Anything that promotes botanic growth, that's the malach of Zayreya. I'm not putting a seed in the ground, doesn't matter. The tachlis, the thing I have in mind when I put the seed in the ground is to cause this thing to grow, to live. So anything that accomplishes that goal is Zayreya. Same thing over here. The idea is I don't care if you did it with a knife, you did it with something else. So maybe I have it wrong. I don't know. Could be that figs and, because if not, I think I have a steer in the Rambams from what we read in Nice Aleph to Ice Base. First he says, it doesn't matter if you're talking about wheat or grapes or dates. They're different semantical, they're different verbs for each activity. One is called kotzer, one is called geider, and one is called baitzer. Yeah? Sizmor, charmachalei, sizmor, lashon hamikra. Yeah? But this already, Tailish, she's saying, is already a Talda. And the way to Nesa Kalim, the Lechem Mishnah says over there, here's the difference. The difference is, one is done by hand, and one is done using a blade of some kind. Muvur b'Gemara Shabbos on Gimel Beis, Haiman, the Shad the Pisa L'Dikla V'Asa Tamri, and Derech Tlisha B'Kach. If a guy is standing on the ground, and he casts a stone up at a date palm tree, and he shears off dates, yeah, I'm not saying you're allowed to do this on Shabbos, but it's not Chiv D'Oraisa, because that's what we call Kalach Hayad. Another big klal in Malach Shabbos is that anytime you do something with a shinui, it's already not the Malach D'Oraisa, it's not Malachas Machshavas. Again, Malachas Machshavas, purposeful, creative activity, is you do it the normal way, because how do the norms come about? Because that's the most efficient way to do it. That's the smartest, that's a mind that's a Yiddish a cup, any kind of a cup, that's figuring out how to do this, wants to do it the quickest and most efficient way possible. Once you start doing it like this, it's not Malachas Machshavas anymore. The Lashon of Shinu is also, a lot of times you find Hilchos Shabbos, Kalach Hayad. Kalach Hayad in particular is talking about the Malach of Eitzah. If somebody carried something out from one Rishus to another, or Abraham's Rishus Rabbim, on the back of his hand, rather than grasped firmly in the palm of his hand, Kalach Hayad, that's a code word for a Shinu. Okay? So this is an example of Shinu. So I think what he's trying to say is that the kind of plants that the normal way to harvest them is by hand, if you use something that cuts them, that's already a shini. I would imagine that by tfuah, that by grain, if you would just chop a clump of grain and uproot it by hand, then it would be, it's the flip side of the same thing. If you can't throw a rock at a tree, and that it should be called that you did the malach in the normative way, I would think that if you would, instead of using a sickle, you would grab up the tool by hand, that would also be a shini. V'amagan Avram, Siman Shin Lamed Vav, Sifkat Yudalf, the Tailish Befiv, Gam Kanen Derech Talisha Bekach, Linyan Chiv. I said, okay, I won't do it with a knife, I won't do it with a rock, I'll do it with a different part of my body, I'll rip it off with my teeth. Okay? No, you're not Chayiv Midaraisa. And Derech Talisha Bekach. Okay? So you hear this, if you pick an apple off a tree on Shabbos, you're Machal Shabbos. If you eat the apple off the tree, you just start biting out of it, Bistanishka Machal Shabbos. Okay, let's skip down to the next paragraph. Utsrar sha'alu b'yavsavim. Okay, this is very similar to the Gemaras that we learned. A rolling stone gathers no moss, but a stationary stone does. Utsrar sha'alu b'yavsavim means a stone that has literally grass on it, moss. Moss grows on a stone. V'asavim shetzamchu al gav achavis, or moss that started growing on top of a barrel. Hatash me'achayiv. Shazehu derech gedulas, this is the way that they grow. V'chen ha'toilish matzitz nakov. Similarly, if you would uproot something, a plant, from a flower pot with a hole in it, that's also a chil Shabbos deraisa of toilish. U'me'atzit she'ena nakov pata she'enza derech gedulasin. An atzit she'ena nakov, it's a very big sugi. I don't want to go there. We'll be there all night. There's in Hilchos Bikurim, there's a 12-column Mishnah Melech about this. Are we talking about a terracotta flower pot? Are we talking about a wood flower pot? Are we talking about a hole in the side? Are we talking about a hole in the bottom? It's shver sugis. I mean, let's just not concentrate on the Indian of Atz Nakul. But suffice to say that it all depends on if this is the natural way for the thing to grow. And I think the point he's trying to make is, if this is the natural habitat, the natural background where the things grows, the chiddush is, we know that moss growing on a barrel top and fungus and mushrooms growing on the dipper, for the well, okay, they're not drawing nutrients from the metal of the dipper or from the wood of the barrel. Right? You're not taking it from their mama. You're not taking it from the thing that gives them life. You're just detaching them from the background where they grow. That's what Aikadav Megidula means. Right? That's the chiddush of these dinim. V'din it's not shayna nakav I'm mishal melech elchas bikurim perak bez lachtas barichas. Okay, you can trust him when he says it's not richas. V'losh aral and perak ches alach gimel. Okay, so the Rambam passes like this Gemara that we just read, that Yechayev mishum oika dav megedulei. The einam of Ram lahedya, the ein ksirel begedulei karka. The Rambam never says mafurish that the malacha of katsira / tailish is limited to gedulei karka. K'moshe kasav achas halacha hey v'zayin be'imur uvedisha beferish. Let me read you those Rambams, so you'll know to contrast what he's talking about. Okay. There's a malacha called ma'amer, gathering. Okay, after the wheat is cut in the fields, you got to bundle it. Making loose wheat into a bundle. Okay, it's a machlokes in the Rishonim if you need to tie it or if you just pile them together. Okay. All right. So the Rambam talks about in la'achila shira kegregaris. Again, he goes into this idea of the varied shiurim depending on what you're being ma'amar for. The ma'amar l'behemish like piagdi, right? And the halachas he says v'ein imur el b'gdulei karka. It doesn't leave anything up to the imagination. There's no imur by non-gedulei karka, right? You have wool socks scattered all over the room, and you move them into a pile in the center of the room. That's not imur. All right. Similarly, he says, "Hadosh k'gregaris chayev." What's disha? Disha is threshing. The old-fashioned agricultural systems, when you had grains growing, so you had this inedible husk that was attached to the germ to the grain, and the next step before you could process it, you had to loosen it up. The way they loosened it up was they used to have the heavy pack animals step on it, and the way that animals would the pressure, by exerting pressure, you started a separation between the desired plant and the undesired klipa, whatever, the thing surrounding it. That's disha. Zokta mafurish, ein disha ela begedulei karka. Hadosh gres chayev, vein disha ela begedulei karka. By ma'amer, he leaves it to the end when he's finishing up. Cases of imur, he says you only have by gedulei karka, and here he says it from the get-go. Disha is only by gedulei karka. He never says by Kotzer, by tailish, and he goes through all of these gemaras of mushrooms and moss and so on and so forth. He never says that it's limited to gedulei karka.
But yeah, it says it doesn't have to be. Doesn't say chovius.
What?
Doesn't say that from chovius you also chayev Kotzer.
Yeah.
So that's not gedulei karka.
Why is that not gedulei karka?
Chovius.
What about the moss itself? Maybe the moss is gedulei karka.
I mean, there's grass growing on the chovius.
Right.
So where's the...
Have you ever taken moss off of a rock on a nature trip? There's always a little dirt underneath that intervened between the rock and the moss. Not so fast. I don't know if that's not called gedulei karka. Aleph. Bay is the Rishonim that when they talk about the very shver sugya of the atzitzin of the flower pots, it could be called an atzitz nakuv, according to some sugyas, according to some Rishonim, if the hole is in the side of the pot, not on the bottom of the pot. Why does that make it an atzitz nakuv? Why is that considered mechubar l'karka? It's meriach. It smells the nutrients. Somehow or another they diffuse up through the ground. You're going to be shocked in a minute to hear how far gedulei karka goes. Okay, just hold on to your hats. You know what? Why extend the suspense? Well, let me share an interessante Taisus with you. So Gemara Bava Kama is talking about the klal u'pratu klal, where we learn for nizkei habar, what kind of a thing can fall into a bar, and you should be chayiv on it. So it's a breit sugya over there. It's a mission that's talking about a lot of different things. Echad shar ve'echad kol b'heimel and feel sabar l'farsh ha'sinai l'tashlumei kefil ha'shavas aveda. A lot of different things in the Torah, dinim in the Torah. Are they limited to shar and chamar or to a lot of different animals? Okay, so the Gemara says like this: what about Maisa Sheni. Then by Maisa Sheni is that Maisa Sheni, either you have to take it to Yerushalayim and eat it there, or if not, if you can't carry it to Yerushalayim, if you think it's going to spoil, you can be paid it, and then you can take the money and you can spend it on other things in Yerushalayim, and that, the Kedusha of Maisa Sheni is nitfas and those things, and you can be Yaitze, your mitzvah eating Maisa Sheni that way. So the Torah is mefaret. The Torah says, "V'nasat hakesef b'chol asher ta'ava nafshecha." Klal, kol asher ta'ava nafshecha. Whatever my heart desires, I can spend the Maisa Sheni money on. Babaku v'tzayin u'beyayin v'sheichar prat. Then there are 4 items enumerated in the middle. That's the prat. Uv'chol asher tishalcha nafshecha. Pasuk ends off again. B'chol asher, whatever you want. Chazav v'kolol. Klal prat klal yat the dental akena prat. So what are the characteristics we're looking at these 4 items? Again, shar, chamar, sheicher. What was the 4th one? Yain v'sheicher. Zog the Gemara. Ma prat mafurish pri v'gdula karka. Something that's a fruit from a fruit, and it's called gedula karka. Av kol pri v'gdula karka. Zog Rashi. What's it coming to in Mayat? What can't you spend Maisa Sheni on? Pri Zog Rashi Vlad Mailid. Yayin ma'anavim. Yayin is not the original product. It comes from something. It came from something that came from something else, right? The anavim, the grapes, came from a vine, and the wine comes from the grapes. The sheichem etmarim. Sheich over here we're talking about mead, about date beer, right? Comes from tamarim. Lemuti kamein upitrius. This comes to exclude fungi and mushrooms. Mushrooms just grow spontaneously. They didn't grow because you put a seed. They didn't come from a previous food, whatever. It's a different botanic process, fungi, than other fruits and vegetables grown. Umayim umelach, then a pri. Mayim umelach is not from a pri. Minerals. The gedule karka lemuute dogim. He has to say lemute dogim. He can't say lemute animals because 2 animals are mentioned in the prat. What's going on here? Gedule karka pri. Understand? Yeah, a shor and a chamor came from something. It's not the shor and chamor the Eibush created in Sheish Tzumei HaMaisa. It had a mother. Every shor and chamor had a mother. It's a pri. But gedule karka? What's for gedule karka does? Zok Taisus. It's relative. Okay. You see from this Gemara that animals are called gedule karka. Dogim not. Animals are called gedule karka. Right? Yachasi, compared mamish to gedule karka, they're not gedule karka. But compared to things like mushrooms and like water, yeah, there's gedule karka. It's also called gedule karka. Maybe because they graze on what you eat. They graze on the herbivores. What? I don't think so. Yeah, Psalus Garan v'Yakov. That's a different klal than gedule karka. Can't be makabel tumah. Carcasses are makabel tumah. It could be other psulim. Not else gedule karka. Okay. So the first chiddush that you see from this taisus is Heipnan al bissel zu verstehen the Yetz the Gemara and Shabbos. It's not such a shock anymore that mitten drinnen when we're talking about mosses and mushrooms and tamarim and echveisvas, they throw in 2 dinim of fishing fish out of a tub and aborting a fetus. Fishing a fish is not so posh anymore because that's still not gedule karka, right? But let's say the malach of dash is limited only to gedule karka. At least you see now a rishon that says, well, that's still gedule karka. Taking an animal out of another animal, that's like picking an apple off a tree. It's gedule karka. Right? The Gemara here calls it shar chamar, gedule karka. Klal prat klal, gedule karka. I mean, I don't know if any Rishonim are chaylik on this taisus. L'chayra, the taisus is mukhrach. I mean, I don't have a different mahalach in the different chazal over here. Okay, let's go a little bit weiter. So with 3 lines on the bottom. The animal vu ram lahadiyah the eng ksir el b'gdula karka k'moshe katzavachas abalach hevazam b'imah v'dirush v'ferish. Okay, so he's leaving his options open. I showed you a mahalach how you can understand the halacha of dildul uber mimei behema. And you could still say that Kotzer and Tailish are limited to gedule karka, right? But he's not committing himself. He said, you haven't caught me yet. You can't find a line in the Rambam where he says that the gather of Tailush or Kotzer is only Gedulei Karka, like he does Mefurish by the other two malachas, Ma'amer and Disha. V'nira, the Seiver, the Chol Midi Shayach Oikadav Megdulei. To me, it seems the way I'm reading the Rambam, because of this conspicuous absence, it's he wasn't worried about the ink by the printer. If he held it was only Gedulei Karka, he would have written it, like he does by Dashanim. The Minchas Chinuch learns, no, you don't have to say that the Dilder Uber B'meya Ima is also Gedulei Karka. Kotzer is not limited to Gedulei Karka. Any Oikam Davar M'makom Gedulei. You take something away from where it grew, even if it's not botanic life, even if it has nothing to do with the ground, but if it grew in a place, and you uproot it, that's the malach of Kotzer. It's not limited to things that grow out of the ground. V'lav dafka b'gedulei karka. Okay, let's turn the page. Your kasha now. Your mechav l'chayra asavim shetzamchu b'chavis l'mugmar kufchasam al'alef. The gam ken lav gedulei karka ein umuvur b'shas l'hadi l'chayiv. Okay, the Gemara says that these grasses that are growing or these pitrius that are growing, they're not really gedulei karka, like you were asking before, and the Gemara still says that yechayiv. Vayim karmel zekur zayin obeis gabi k'shusa v'lamaskana d'ma'araka ravi. After hochanami ma'araka ravi. Okay, it says from the hops, it's not a raya, even though the hops are not growing directly from the ground, they're growing on another plant, but it still could be they're getting their nutrients from the ground, and they're called gedulei karka. The Harash Bekan Besugya, the Ramas Lo Amrinan, maybe B'Shem Ramban, the Einachai Mishum Oikadav Megedulei Rak B'Dugulei Karka V'Evi Rayas. The Rashba is Chaylik. The Rashba says that the malacha of Disha is only Shayach to Gedulei Karka. V'Yispor Eid Mizeh B'Siyat Teshmaya. Okay, he's gonna dingzich with the Rashba. Certainly the Rashba is going to say that the Rambam also holds like that it's only limited to Gedulei Karka. But again, just to reiterate, it's something that got me headed in the direction of this malacha to start with. Again, lama trachtan for a second. Let's think about this for a second. For those of you who walked in light, Svarnai learns in last week's parsha. It says by the Mun that vayetzim in ha'am lilkai b'yam hashvi. They weren't even been assigned. Moshe Ben told them, don't be malakat. It wasn't even supposed to fall. The minhag, to put out the bread for the birds, because that's on Aviram at night. They spread a ration of mun. They want to make a liar out of Moshe Ben, or the birds, whatever. It was an attempt. They wanted to be malakat mun b'yam hashvi. Sfarna says if there would have been mun there, and if it would have been malakat it's chil Shabbos mamish. Why? He tells through this Gemara on Shabbos Kuf Zayin. It's like taking the moss, the mushrooms off of a dipper from the well. Do you think it's a tush though? You understand this Svarna? Even if you say it's not limited to, obviously mun is not gedulei karka. What bracha do you make on mun? What did Dar Midbar? They had to make a bracha before they ate mun. Shako? Why?
Because it's an all-encompassing general bracha for anything that doesn't grow from the ground, it doesn't grow from a tree, it doesn't come from a grape.
Okay. What? A lot of Rishonim say the nusach was Hamaytz Lechem Min Hashamayim. The Ben Ish Chai says the lashon was the nusach habracha was Hamamte Lechem Min Hashamayim. But whatever it was, yeah.
From the ground.
That's right. It's not just it wasn't from the ground. It's not even hushtel. Lamaisa mushrooms. I don't know how they grow, but they grow on the pitcher. Yeah, I don't know how hops grow, but they grow on the brambles. This didn't grow on the sand. It was parked on the sand. That's a tushtel. I don't. Geef the chance to verstehen. I mean, it's not my kasha. We learn Kli Chamda. It's from Meir Dan's kasha. What kind of a tushtel is that? Okay, how can you say that this it's chayv mishum dash? I mean, excuse me, mishum kotzer. That's a tushtel. It didn't grow here. I mean, he has a better kasha. I mean, he says it's faket from a chazal. I'll say I'll say over his kasha already. He says like this: their midrashas chalukais. If it said mafurish in last week's parsha, the mun didn't fall on Shabbos. It didn't fall. It's not going to fall on Shabbos. What about on Yontif? Let's stop to think about this. Da midbar. Does man fall on Yontif or not?
Which Yom Tov did they have?
What?
They didn't have sukkahs
Why not?
because they were in that Eka.
That doesn't mean they can keep sukkahs. They certainly had Pesach. They had Shavuos.
They didn't have Pesach either
Why not?
because they didn't
They have Korban Pesach maybe.
Mila.
What?
They didn't have Mila.
Yeah, but Yom Tov.
But the Yontif they had.
But they didn't
Maybe,
know.
maybe they couldn't do the Korban. The Korban is one din, the Yontif is another din. That is some malach on Pesach, didn't it? Could they write on Pesach? Could they weave on Pesach? I needed some time. Avada nicht.
Is there a
What?
tzor on Yom Tov?
What?
Is there a tzor on Yom Tov? I mean, the idea was a tzor by man, no?
Okay. I don't know if the idea was Eitzah. This one is saying the idea was Kotzer. The problem was Kotzer. So what do you say? So he says it's Madrashas Chalukas. The two Madrashim, one Madrash says that man fell on Yontif, one Madrash says that man didn't fall on Yontif. Okay? So the Ramedan asks the Kasha this way. He says that there's a Yerushalmi, there's a Taisa that brings a Yerushalmi. Unhead Masechta Beya, Beya and all the B'yantiv. First mention Masechta Beya. Right? Beya and all the B'yantiv, you can't use it. Muktzah, Noilet, all kinds of interesting halachic concepts. There's a Mahalach in the Gemara, in the Sugi over there, that the reason why you can't use a Beya and all the B'yantiv is it's a Gzer Darban, Gzer Mishum Peiros HaNaishrin. Gzer, you're not allowed to eat windfalls, you can't eat Peiros that blow off a tree on Shabbos, because we're afraid, Chazal were afraid, that if we let you eat the what fell off the tree on its own, you may forget yourself, you may climb the tree, and you may pull it off. Problem is this, Frank the Taisus, we're not talking Shabbos, we're talking Yontiv. What kind of a Gzerim Mishum Peretz HaNaishrin? If you climb the tree and you pull the apple off the tree, you pull the date off the palm tree. What shlachst das getan? What happened to Eichel Nefesh? Malachas Eichel Nefesh is mutter on Yontiv. You can cook on Yontiv, you can kindle a flame on Yontiv, if that's what you want to eat that day of Yontiv. So if I want to eat fruits on Yontiv, why can't I be Kotzer fruits? Why can't I be Tailish fruits? Good kasha? Taisus a kasha. Emphater Azai. There's a Yerushalmi the Dashan Smuchen. It says, Achasher Yeichel L'chol Nefesh. That's how we learn out the heter of Malachas Eichel Nefesh. That one of the main, you said, I saw another one, but the main thing that differentiates Yontif from Shabbos is Malachas that are L'tzarech Eichel Nefesh and Mutter. The pasuk before that is, okay, Ushmatem es hamatzis. So the Yerushalmi says like this: the only malachas that are mutter mishum eichel nefesh are mishimur ve'elach. Now, every box of shmur matzah that we buy says shmur mishas. That's a hiddur. Me'ikar adin shmur matzah only has to be mishas lisha. When the rubber hits the road, when the water hits the flour, that's when you need hashgacha. That's when chimutz starts. So that's shimur mechimutz. Zok the Yerushalmi. Melisha ve'elach, malachas of eichel nefesh and mutter. Anything that's in the sequence of malachas before lisha, before kneading a dough, that's chayiv, even on Yantiv. In other words, no, you cannot pick a fruit off a tree or a stalk of wheat off of the stalk on Yantiv. Absolutely not, right? Frag the klichem da'azai. If the Svan is right. If on Mon, it's also Shaykh, the malach of Tailish of Kotzer, yeah. I don't know, what's the derech to malach Mon? With a knife or with your hand? Whatever it is, man. Malach Achas, I told her. But a malach deraisa. Malach deraisa it is. Yeah? What? How could they pick the Mon on Yontif? So how could there be a medrash that says Mon fell on Yontif? For what purpose would Mon have fallen on Yontif? Decorative? What's it doing there? They can't use it anyway. Huh? Nice kasha? All right. Anyway, let's get back to Talmud Chinuch over here. All right. The next paragraph. V'nei divrei Rashba enu muvanim. Muvanimly. I don't understand what the Rashba is saying. Masha Kotzer shkem mashma midivrei Aram Perek Yud Aleph. So before we go on, we don't have texts for everything, but let me read you the Rambam on Hey Perek Yud Aleph. Okay, by Perek Yud Aleph in Hilchos Shabbos, the Rambam is already up to the malacha of Sheichet. Okay, Sheichet is called the Chazal, usually Netilas Neshama. Okay, it's a machlokes. If it's Mechayim Mishum Tzeveya, it's not even its own malach, it's just a told of malach of dyeing. Dyeing, I don't mean peggering, I mean dyeing as in dyeing fabrics. Right? Because the Beis HaShchita gets, the blood makes an indelible stain on the leather, that'll always, it changed colors. But we, Maskana, Sheikhet is the gather, the tachlis, as we always say, of this Av Malacha is Natilas Neshama. Right? So, HaSheikhet Chayiv, V'loi Sheikhet Belvad, Ela Kol HaNeitel Neshama Lechem, Mekom Min HaChayiv, Behem B'voi, V'dog, V'sheretz, Ben B'shchita, Oy Ben Achira, slashing the throat, stabbing it, Hakah, just beating it to death, Hachaynik as Achai, strangulating something, it's all the same Av Malacha. Doesn't matter how you do it, if you got it dead, that's Natilas Neshama. Now listen to this. Okay, this is a Gemara that should sound familiar to us already tonight. Lefichach, imhel a dog misaf el shalmayim. If you bring up a fish from the tub of water, v'nicha yad shemeis chayiv mishum chaynik. Yeah, you strangulated it. Yeah, a fish out of water is like a land roving animal out of oxygen, right? V'layat shiyamus alakivin shiyavish b'kasela ben snaypirav chayiv. Shaydan yachal lichias. Exactly, she is obviously quoting the Gemara on Kuf Zayin on Beis and Shabbos. Hashayla dag minayam, right? This idea of if it gets dry to a certain point, even now if you throw it back in the tub, you're not going to resuscitate it. It coated already. It flatlined this fish. Hayshit yadei lemei behema v'dildel uber shevimei chayiv. So from the Seder of the Halachas of the Rambam, not from the Seder of the Halachas of the Gemara, but from the Seder of the Halachas of the Rambam, do these two cases, fishing a fish out of a tub of water, or aborting an animal from its mother's womb, okay? Does that sound like we're talking about Kotzer, Aikadav Megidule, or are we talking about Natilas Neshama? Yeah, that's made the Rashba. The Rashba says, why does the Rambam have to say this? You could learn the Sugya, and learn like Taisus. Dogim will be a problem. Because Dogim, Rashi says, Mefurish, is Mumuit from spending Mois Shani on. Right? But certainly the halacha of Dildul Uber B'Bein Beheva, if you learn like the Taisus over there in Bava Kama, that behemoths are considered Gedulei Karka, right? So why couldn't the Rambam have been Masada the halacha of Dildul Uber B'Bein Beheva in all the other iterations of Talisha? Grapes, dates, mushrooms, hops, mosses, aborting fetuses. It's Aikadav Megidule. So the Rashba says, it's Mash from the Rambam. The Rambam didn't want to learn that way. The Rambam, number one, the Rambam seems to hold the behemoths are not Gedulei Karka. And number two, that the Malach of Kotzer is limited to Gedulei Karka. You can do it either way. You can either say, that Dildul Uber Behemoth is the Malach of Kotzer because a behemoth is considered Gedulei Karka, and the Malacha of Tailish of Kotzer is limited to Gedulei Karka. Or you could go the other way, like the Chinuch wants to go, and say, Lav Dafka, we look at behemoths as being Gedulei Karka, right? Because again, this Taisus is kind of hedgy-medgy. He's hedging his bets. Yeah, it's Gedulei Karka, but not compared to real Gedulei Karka. All right? So it could be that the behemoth is not Gedulei Karka, but who says the Malach of Kotzer is limited to Gedulei Karka? So the Rashba says, take a look at this Rambam. Rambam seems to be voting no on both counts. All right? Otherwise, why does the Rambam have to be Mesader, this halacha, in Hilchas Shchita? He could have been Mesader, this halacha, in Hilchas Kotzer. You get the Rashba's Mashmayas, the Rashba's Raya? Okay. Dine, diver Rashba in Muvon, Mashkasa Shkem Mashma diver Ram Pekid Aleph. Dine, Harash because of all Gemara Sham, the Amar Shmuel, Hayshid Yel Lemei Behem of a Dildul Uber Shvimei Chayev, my timer, Mila Amar, Hachanami Havalei Akadav Megidulei. It's certainly mashma. The way the Gemara over there tells it to the hops on the bramble bushes, yeah, it certainly sounds like we're talking Kotzer. We're not talking about Natilas Neshama. Let's pause for a minute over here. Can anyone think of a problem? We see the obvious problems in applying Kotzer to taking the fetus out of the mother animal. Can anyone think of a problem of applying the concept of Natilas Neshama from taking a...
Maybe it's not called, it doesn't have its own life, maybe. So, yeah? just like if you kill an Iber, you're not chayiv misa. Right? It's not called killing.
Nafel, right? Even kill a baby, a born baby, postpartum, if it's less than 30 days old. Not chayiv misa for that. If it's until neshama, first the thing has to have a full shtandig in the neshama, I would think, possibly. Here's another interesting shaila. Dildel mebehema, side of Mefarshim and a Gemara, and side of what the Rambam says, seems to be being misader and limiting it to until neshama. So the animal's dead. You're aborting the fetus. What about a live birth? What happens if you induce labor? You're a veterinarian, and you induce labor in an animal on Shabbos. Not pikuach nefesh. You don't have to save the life of a behemoth. Whatever, it's convenient for you. You know, Sunday you have a golf match with other veterinarians, and on Shabbos you want to birth the calf. Live birth. Is that like a davar megedulei? Or does Aika Davar Megedulei also include not Netilas Neshama? It's not a Bal Neshama, a wheat plant or a fig, yeah. But it's a Bal Chias, yeah. It was growing. Kolzman, it was on the tree. You were mafsik it. You detached it. It says in Malkum Gidulei, places growth from the place where it draws life. You make the call. What do I mean? I'm Red and Lennon. I'm talking theoretically. What do you think would be the din in such a case? Could you possibly, if we'll say that aborting a fetus is Aika Davar Megedulei, for whatever reason, either the malach is not limited to Gedulei Karka, or animals are Gedulei Karka, right? What about a live birth? Nobody seems to be talking explicitly about a live birth. Is a live birth Aika Davar Megedulei? Or do you say, well, since it goes on living, you weren't Aika it, really? How do you look at it? You hear the shaila? What do you think?
The Gemara mentioned by the Dildu.
Yeah.
Die. The Gemara doesn't even
Rashi says.
Rashi.
Let me see Klar. I mean, I got two Rishonim. Al Pishlam and Yakum Dovid. Rashi says by Dildu a minute. First of all, Rashi says Mefurish by the fish. Chayev. The Gemara says what you chayev for? Chayev mishum netilas neshama. The surah chayev. So Rashi is not ambiguous about it. Dildo, okar, your upper ears, shehapi losai al yaday dildo gemapelt. You're aborting it. Rashi learns you're aborting it, and I don't think it would be called netilas neshama if you didn't abort it. And the Rama brings it together with other tziurim and netilas neshama. It's pretty clear that dildo, doesn't say hamavaker, as a para. It says dildo sounds like you're aborting for whatever reason you want to abort it, but you aborted it. I'm asking a Shai, what would be if it was a live birth? What do you think?
Not a problem.
Not a problem?
You're not Aika from its source of life. You're changing its source. Or it's a fish you take out of water. It doesn't have sustenance.
Right.
A natal, whatever you call it, a baby before it's born, you're removing it from its source of sustenance. A calf when it's born naturally,
Yeah.
you're just converting its source of sustenance from the mother to grass or milk or whatever. So you haven't removed it from its source of sustenance, you changed it.
But I'm trying to remember, there are 39 malachas, they're not 38 malachas, right? Nobody's going to tell me that netilas neshama and Kotzer are main malach achas. They can't all apply to everything, right? There has to be different gedarim for Kotzer and for sheichet, right? Or also what we call main malach achas. The two names, like you said before, Kotzer chitim and Beitzer anavim. It's not tolda. It's semantics. It's precisely the same malacha on two different kind of plants. Okay. So here's my thing. Okay. When you rip mushrooms off of a wet pail, do they die? I don't think so.
You don't remove the pail is not their source of sustenance.
Right. Exactly. Oh, that's my right. That's what I'm trying to prove. So the point is not like by netilas neshama that you were mafsik the chiyas, that now it's going to start dying. That's not the point. By Aika Davar Megedulei. Aika Davar Megedulei just means if you uproot it from the background from the place where it is growing, it might still continue to grow. Who knows? If the mushrooms, get off of a pail and put on the ground, maybe they'll grow quicker, maybe they'll grow better. Maybe the air flows better down there. I'm not so sure. I could hear that birthing a live animal might be called Oika David Megidulai. Why is that less than taking mushrooms off of a pail? Didn't it grow in the womb? Isn't it the natural background for where it grew? Certainly a lot more, to me, a lot more Oika David Megidulai than mun. Did the mun change qualitatively when they picked it up off the sand? Did it start to spoil? Did it start to... I'll say even weiter. We know that there are certain plants that continue growing after you pick them. Everyone picks bananas when they're green, they turn yellow on the shelf. Everyone picks an avocado when it's hard as a rock, it turns soft, it turns ripe on the shelf.
Maybe they're in the process of spoiling it, just at a certain stage where they're...
Oh, that's what ripening is. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not challenging you. I'm just asking.
Take it off the thing when they start to go bad.
Do they?
Yeah.
You let it alone, it starts to go bad. You bring it home, in a few days, it starts to shrivel and to...
I don't know how. I think that our contemporary mushrooms are grown on the ground in mushroom farms. He's talking about, I don't know if they're edible mushrooms. I don't know if edible is the point. Remember, Kotzer is not limited to edibles. If you're being Kotzer and edible, then it has the shear as a gregaris. It can be Kotzer firewood too. It's unedible. It doesn't have to be an edible. You know, maybe they use the mushrooms for medicinal purposes. Maybe they smoked them and got high. I don't know what they were using the mushrooms for. Yeah.
Being oik is something that's not going to be detached.
What?
Being oik is something that's not normally going to be detached. With pain, it's eventually going to be detached.
Fruits on trees are not normally going to be detached. Pears are nashim. You don't even have to pick them. They're windfalls. If you leave it on there long enough, the stem will go brittle enough that it'll fall off on its own. Or the weight of I don't know exactly the process. Maybe the weight of the fruit gets to be so much that the stem can't bear it anymore on the tree. It's a natural thing for fruits. I don't know what would happen to a wheat field or a cornfield if you don't take a sickle to it. But fruits, it's man malachach. It's zav malachach deraisa. They'll naturally come off. Dal mahacha your pula. Left alone to its own devices, it'll be born on its own, so to speak. I don't know. I'm not asking him. I'm just trying to get the getter of the malacha in my mind. Okay.
I think if you're cutting the umbilical cord, you're oika. If you're not cutting it, you're just merely facilitating the delivery.
Yeah.
Now the foal, the calf, is outside the animal, and it's the animal that bites off the umbilical cord and licks it, etc. Then you're helping or facilitating the removal. I would say is not oika, because it's still attached. So
Interesting. If the umbilical cord is still there, it's still attached. In other words, if I yank on the wheat plant, but lamaisa the roots don't come out of the ground, or I yank on a grape or something like that, and I stretch the stem, as long as
not a cure. So your question has to go. I facilitate its removal and I cut the umbilical.
Now listen, my biology education ended in 9th grade, but I want to know something. What happens in mammals, okay, humans, bovines, I don't care what. What happens if you don't detach an umbilical cord? The sac that the thing was growing in wouldn't eventually come out with it?
Eventually,
Yeah.
eventually, but in the
Right.
meantime, it's still drawing nutrients of some sort. It begins to breathe on its own because
Right.
it's outside of the amniotic fluid.
Right.
The lungs begin to work.
Right.
The nutrients continue to travel through the umbilical cord.
So, Balzek Gufanu Danan, does Oika David Megidulai mean from the background where it grew, or you mean that you broke the nutrition chain? To me, I don't think it has to do with breaking the nutrition chain, because if that was so, then I don't understand Kameyan and Pitrius. I don't understand how mushrooms, how taking mushrooms off of a pail. Are they getting less nutrition now that they're off the pail than when they were on the pail? They were just adhered to the pail.
Mice, so once you take them off, they do begin to wither and die.
Okay.
No matter how you say they got their nutrients from. Mice, they do begin to wither and die.
Okay, so let's pause for a second. I mean, not much of a pause. We only have 3 minutes to Ma'ariv. But can we say that a good working definition is that sheichet and kotzer are exactly the same malachas? One applies to plants and one applies to animals. Right? That's essentially what you're telling me. If
Aside
you
from the netilas neshama aspect.
no, well,
Aside from the taking away life aspect.
okay. Let's turn the shiloh this way. Okay, let's say I start butchering an animal while it's still alive. Okay, I'm not going to be over menachai. Yeah, I need it for Fido. I need it to feed my dog. I don't know what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it for something purposeful. Yeah. Is that the Netilas Neshama or not? I'm not talking about the Netilas Neshama because of the bleeding. Anytime you chayvel in a behema, and it doesn't have to be nightel the whole neshama. If the chiyas is in the blood and the blood comes out, but dal mahacha the blood loss for the behema. Let's say I can do bloodless surgery. I can lop off a piece of meat tissue from a living behema, yeah, without causing the animal to bleed. I don't know if it's possible. Let's talk in theory, theoretically, yeah. Would that be Kotzer? Would that be Netilas Neshama? What would that be? Okay, since we're not going to come to any maskana, just to get everyone even more thoroughly confused, consider for a moment another Av Malacha, the Malacha of Geizes, of shearing sheep. Is shearing sheep Netilas Neshama? Is shearing sheep... Yeah, obviously shearing sheep is not Netilas Neshama because there's no...
Sheep still lives.
What? The sheep still lives. The hair wasn't... The only hair that's alive is what's on the scalp. Right? If not, we'd all be screaming we need to be anesthetized every time we go to the barber. Yeah? Our fingernails and our hair, the part that we cut is no longer living when we cut it, right? But is that something new? Is that just the animal equivalent of the Kotzer? What's that all about? All right, Rabbi said, Baruch Hashem, we have a minyan and we have a chiyuv, so Lamadav and Ma'ariv. That's it for Minchas Chinuch for tonight. Interessante inyan in my room, Gerät.